The collapse of Yugoslavia is a sad moment in history, where brotherhood and unity ended and thousands of lives were lost. Even 30 years later, there isn't a clear victor, and the damage of the Yugoslav wars can still be felt throughout the region. In this three-episode series, I want to look at what could have happened if the Serbs had won the Yugoslav wars and created Greater Serbia, what if Yugoslavia had never collapsed, and as a bonus, what if Croatia had left Yugoslavia. Now let's begin the video. The concept of the Serbians winning the Yugoslav wars is often poorly defined. A lot of people think that the Serbs wanted to keep Yugoslavia together, which is false. What they actually wanted is to keep the Serbian majority of Yugoslavia and had little desires for the land that had North Serbs, such as Macedonia and Slovenia. Slovenia and Macedonia were let off relatively easy compared to places like Bosnia. So as winning, we will take keeping the majority Serbian areas, as that's what the elite had in mind at the time. In our timeline, Yugoslavia didn't directly intervene in the Croatia War of Independence. And the Bosnian War, because President Milosevic wanted plausible deniability. The thing in that plausible deniability is that it prevented Serbian troops from properly defending the areas that they had occupied from Croatia and Bosnia. That plausible deniability from the Yugoslav government was there because the international community was heavily sanctioning the country. For the longest time, the Yugoslav government denied sending troops to the Serbian Kraljina, Republika Srpska, and instead maintained that they only funded their armies but didn't directly send troops, which greatly impacted the pro-unionist forces. If we had someone more radical in the government, like Vojislav Sajeli, who is an outspoken Serbian nationalist who presented this picture in the Serbian parliament way after the Yugoslav wars. Yet this is not a joke, this picture was presented in the Serbian parliament. This guy took himself really seriously. We might have a lot more direct involvement in Yugoslavia itself. Another problem that we have with the Serbian victory in the war is that the Soviet Union had fallen, and there were not many nations willing to support Yugoslavia, or in that case Serbia, in annexing or keeping the majority parts of Croatia, for example. So, in this video we will have two scenarios. The total Serbian victory and a partial, more internationally acceptable Serbian victory. For the first scenario, a partial Serbian victory in the Yugoslav wars, having a partial Serbian victory is not that difficult to imagine. Serbia didn't declare independence immediately after the referendum, which is not something many people know. The referendum was held on the 19th of May 1991, and Croatia only declared independence on the 25th of June 1991. That's a whole month where, instead of Serbia protesting Croatian actions, they could have better prepared for the war, for example, occupying Dubrovnik as of shortening the front line before Croatia even could declare independence, like they did for Banja Luka in Bosnia, another major city in Bosnia that was occupied at the beginning of the Bosnian War by Serbian forces. The GNA, Yugoslav National Army, was way better armed and prepared than the armies of Bosnia and Croatia. Another thing that we could do to have the chances of Serbia winning the war is fully using the GNA Air Force with support of Russia to avoid the no-fly zone that was set by NATO in our timeline. For the war with Croatia, and while the war with Croatia is mostly unavoidable, the Bosnian War is very much avoidable. The Milosevic government could have avoided the Bosnian War, as that had a lot heavier presence in Bosnia than in Croatia. Croatia at that time was well more established and stable than the Bosnian government right before the referendum. The Milosevic government did not believe that the independence referendum would succeed, because the Serbian population had largely abstained from voting in the referendum. The turnout was low 63%, which was way lower than in the Croatian or the Slovenian referendum at that time. Had Milosevic's government more heavily intervened before the referendum with something like political assassinations, heavier military presence in the capital, or an outright forced replacement of the Bosnian president with a pro-Serbian one, like it happened in Montenegro, which had a pro-Serbian president that followed everything that Milosevic said. In that case, succession might very well could have been avoided. It is possible, not guaranteed, but it is highly possible that Yugoslavia could have avoided Bosnia seceding, which it could have not with Croatia, for example. This, however, would not completely mean that there won't be any fighting in Bosnia. However, a guerrilla war with Bosnia is still in the Union is very much preferable to a full Bosnian legal succession from Yugoslavia. As did Slovenia and Croatia fully legally succeed, they could argue that they are no longer in Yugoslavia and Yugoslavia had no legal right to keep troops on them. If Bosnia did not secede, the war would have been a lot more like the Kosovo War, where Kosovo did not legally secede from Yugoslavia, even though there was a guerrilla fight for independence. With all that in mind that we have changed, how will the war still turn out? Well, the war will be a lot more of a 1v1 with Serbian separatists, more heavily aided by the Yugoslav government than the complete chaos that we had in our timeline with Bosnians fighting the Croats and then Bosnian Croatia and all of that. We would have a much simpler 1v1 against Croatia and Yugoslavia. Why I'm not mentioning Slovenia is because Slovenia was not in the list of places that wanted to be included in this Greater Serbia. There are very little Serbs in Slovenia itself, so the Milosevic government was more or less set on letting them go. I expect that the war will end a lot earlier than either from Serbian and Croatian peace deal or more realistically international pressure. I expect Croatia to try to push out the separatists and mostly fail. What Milosevic orders the separatists to not push into Croatia is to not spite the international community. So, how will a peace deal look like? We have two options at the table. Most of the Serbian majority areas from Croatia are giving independence, and then a referendum follows on them if they either prefer an independence or to join Yugoslavia, with certainty that they will join Yugoslavia. Or the second option is to create an autonomous Serbian state inside of Croatia, which is an interesting concept, a little like Bosnia. But instead of Bosnia being two separate entities, this will be more like Vojvodina or Kosovo was in Serbia at the time, with having legal autonomy but still being a legal part of Croatia. I expect that this partial victory scenario, Vukovar area, will be directly given independence and will be annexed into Yugoslavia, and the coastal areas, i.e. Karljana, as it was called, would still be part of Croatia, but will be an autonomous province inside of Croatia with official languages being Serbian and Croatian. So how does the future of the Serbian majority Yugoslavia looks like after this victory that we just had? To be completely honest and blunt, for me it looks very bleak. First, the whole nation will be economically damaged for all the sanctions and damage of the war. Second, Yugoslavia will be internationally very isolated, even more even in this more restricted victory scenario. And third, the dysfunctional Yugoslav system that led to this war will very much still be in place. While the system itself might be reformed in the future, or even consolidated, it needs to be completely reformed. Either that the Bosnians have more autonomy, or that the state becomes a unitary Serbian state in name for Serbs, which will lessen the administrative difficulties like Montenegro, for example, being its own republic. If such a referendum for a unitary Serbian state follows, I believe that the state will be much more stable in the future. I also have to mention the crimes against humanity committed during the Yugoslav wars. While they might be lessened, especially with the shortened time frame of the war, and Milosevic in power instead of some radical like Vojislav Sajeli, I am not in any way saying that Milosevic was a good person. I am just saying having Wilhelm II is probably better than having Adolf Hitler, if you can understand me. Okay? Uh, but still, people will be forcibly displaced from their homes, especially Croats, and killed en masse, genocided, or forcibly Serbianized, which is what comes with this Serbian victory. With the victory in the war, we could also imagine that Milosevic's regime would be even more entrenched with major reform, like I mentioned, like liberalizing Yugoslavia or becoming a unitary state, being highly unlikely, at least for the foreseeable future in that scenario. I believe that this unstable, dysfunctional Yugoslavia, being majority Serbian, even though there's still Bosniaks, and I did not talk a lot about the Macedonians, but it doesn't really matter if the Macedonians are in the Union. Macedonia was kind of a meh to the Serbian regime. If they're in, that's a bonus, but if they're out, they don't really care. There are not a lot of Serbs, and Macedonia is one of the poorest nations in Europe, so it doesn't make too much of a difference. I personally believe that either the Kosovo War of 2008, I either believe that the Kosovo War that will soon follow, or the 2008 economic crisis will be the breaking point of this Yugoslavia and might commence another civil war or a total collapse. So, as for the total Serbian victory scenario, which is way more radical, I would like to get a radical as Vojislav Sajeli at the start of the Yugoslav wars to be the leader of Yugoslavia. How we do that is not important. He was already into politics, but had his own SRS, Serbian Radical Party, which was not very popular at the time and became popular after the Yugoslav wars. Now, instead of that, we will make it so instead of Milosevic, he is in power. How we do that, as I said, is not important. What is important are his actions during power. Where the differences begin are in the Croatian War of Independence. I believe that he will still try, as I said, to prevent Bosnian succession, which will stop a lot of the problems that later happen on in the war. Instead of caution and plausible deniability, I believe that he will get the GNA completely into the war, march on to Zagreb, shock the international community as he is invading a nation which just declared independence, and will annex most of Croatia because I believe he will get the entire GNA into the. I believe he will get the entire GNA to invade Croatia, and the GNA was a lot more modern and well equipped than the newer Croatian independence armies. I believe that he will annex most of Croatia, as I showed in this. I believe he will annex most of Croatia and leaving the rest, like the Zagreb area, a military occupation zone. No democracy, military occupation. He will even more brutally than Milosevic ethnically cleanse Croatia to make Yugoslavia a purely ethno state full of Serbs, which is fucking insane. I believe a crisis will develop after the war, which will be very similar to that in Kuwaitian nature, where we see a giant coalition of nations. And I highly, highly doubt that there will be any nations at all, not major at all, supporting the Sajeli regime in this Greater Serbia. I also believe that he will quickly make this new Yugoslavia a unitary state, Greater Serbia most likely, or just Serbia. And I like to think his regime will be very comparable to the regime of Nazi Germany in our timeline, with concentration camps for Croats and Bosniaks, mass surveillance, total control of the media and the state. Basically, a totalitarian regime. I believe that the inevitable coalition will form and occupy Yugoslavia or Serbia. I believe he will make it a unitary state. Administration will be given to the UN under a mandate to coordinate independence and stability in the region, as well as to prevent anarchy. So, I hope you like this scenario. My microphone is not that good as it's my English accent. However, I put a lot of time into this scenario and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you found my voice annoying, that's okay. Let me know in the comments. If you found my video interesting, that is great. If you want me to maybe improve the quality of the sound, you can tell me that in the comment section. I will be really grateful for any kind of feedback. And thank you very much for watching the video. I kiss you on the heart and bye.